Welcome back to the Behind the Drapes podcast. I'm your host, Kenny. In today's episode, we're going to be talking to Dr. Danie Leahy, who's one of my good friends from college and who's also one of the main reasons why I'm an anesthesia resident today. Dr. Leahy is currently doing her combined cardiothoracic and ICU fellowship down in Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland. Danie and I both worked for UVM Rescue when we were in college, and when I was in med school, I remember reaching out to her because she was pursuing a residency in anesthesia and asking her, how did she end up finding that path? And really, it was her roots in UVM Rescue that made it seem like the most ideal place for her to be. So in this episode, we talk more about the skill set she gained from UVM Rescue, why she decided to do the combined cardiac ICU fellowship, and where her career path is headed in the future. Stay tuned to see what's going on behind the drapes with Dr. Leahy. So were you around? You're in the ICU now, obviously, right? That's what you're doing this year?
Yeah, so, now I'm doing fully cardiac, but with the cardiac year, everyone is required to do 4 weeks of ICU. So no matter what cardiac, where you're doing your training, you have to do a month of cardiac ICU. So this just happened very well, and here I am doing my. So yeah.
What time did you get out of work today?
I think I got home probably around 6:37, something like that.
Okay.
Most of my co-fellows would be like, "Why are you staying so late?" And I was like, "It's like this is what I love to do." So yeah, I'm gonna stay here.
Are you like the only fellow that does afternoon rounds? Of course. Oh, that's amazing. Well, welcome Danie Leahy to the show.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you here.
It's been awesome. I've been looking forward to it and definitely excited to have, you doing this podcast. I think it's really awesome.
So I don't know if you remember when we were on rescue and we went to, I guess it was a 40th banquet, whichever was like the biggest milestone that we were there, and like all the guys wore tuxes. Do you remember what you wore that year?
Was that, oh boy, the 40th, was that the white dress? No. I don't know.
You had like a long ball gown that was like teal.
Oh yeah. White
And I don't know if my parents were there or they've seen pictures, but they remember you from that dress and they call you the mermaid girl because of that dress. And so every time you come up in conversation, obviously we're talking about this, they're like, "Oh, you're gonna interview the mermaid girl." And I was like, "Yep, exactly."
I do remember it was like sequin, or like had like gemstones like around the collar and all that stuff. So
yeah. So you're like Ariel in my parents' eyes, basically.
I'll take it.
But yeah, so thanks for saying yes when I texted you, and you've been obviously a guiding path for me to getting to the point where I am.
Yeah.
So how did you, I guess let's back up all the way to UVM Rescue since I brought it up. Do you remember when we first met?
My first memory is doing some training. I'm sure we met like before this a little bit, but I think my first vivid memory is doing training. You know how the quarters were super snug and like you couldn't there wasn't anywhere to sit. So we were like, one was on one bunk bed, one was sitting on the other bunk bed. It smelled like, whatever college dorm almost. And so that was the huge. And I remember sitting there with a binder and like going through stuff and then just looking at the duck boots that you were wearing. And that's my favorite memory.
You're like, this kid's not going to make it.
Right. It's just crazy to kind of think back and like those little Kenny, little Danie, like where we were then and kind of where we are now. And I think too often about rescue and just I haven't really gotten to go back to Vermont in a little bit of time, but think about the people who are there now and just what, 10 years from now their lives are gonna be like. And it's pretty profound to think about what an impact it did have on us. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like we both sort of saw each other become like leaders, and also like the ability to like command like a scene, like a 911 scene. What are like a few of the skill sets that you think brought you towards anesthesia?
So I think that I didn't recognize it at the time with rescue. I think, you kind of view EMS and emergency pre-hospital care kind of almost like just another arm of emergency medicine. And it really wasn't until I was going, I think, my fourth year of medical school, and I'd already chosen anesthesia. And I was talking to one of the chief anesthesia residents, and he's like, "Man, this like, of course you were destined for anesthesia. What you do in the back of an ambulance is what like an anesthesiologist does." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And so I think it sort of almost set me up to really be a good fit for this career because, you are there sometimes alone, depending, if you're working with just your driver and then just you in the back. You may be the only person with that patient in this extremely critical moment, but not even just taking care of them like their physiology and their body, but just talking them through what's happening or being that comforting voice, which after he mentioned those things, I was like, wow, you're right. I've been doing this for the past how many years? And now here I am making this truly my career. So I would say that experience first, like the one-on-one with that patient, through some really challenging times and scary times for them too, if they're in the middle of having a heart attack. Here you are, that only person. So I think that really set the stage, but even more so, like taking that a step further, what else did UVM Rescue give us and me? And I think it really had to do with the leadership. And, I hate to say like you grow up fast when you're on rescue, but you kind of don't realize it until you're out of there where, someone who's 20 years old is dealing with some really, really serious situations and things that most 20-year-olds don't have to see and to be a part of. But at such a young age in the scheme of things, your ability to really focus and take care of a scene, a person, but really the whole situation and lead the team of when you are that crew chief, leading those younger members and everyone through what's going on. And I think that for the most part, none of us are the kind of people who step on a scene and everyone's like, oh, like EMS is here. But, when that happens to be the time that you need to really speak up, people will listen. But it's not like you step on and people all of a sudden, like, oh, they're here. But there's an element of respect, I think, that comes when you do speak up. And I find that to be very similar in the operating room where, you can have fun and be with your colleagues and everything. But when things really start to get hairy and you speak up, people stop and they're like, oh, this is serious. And so I think all of those pieces together really helped me to develop the skills I needed for this specialty. And I gotta say the support that you have from your peers and stuff too is always great, and having those lifelong friendships and those have all also maybe not necessarily led me to have like skills, but led me to have support to get to where I am right now. So
Absolutely. Yeah, really lifelong friends. I mean, we're examples of that too, but even some of the weddings I've been going to, like UVM Rescue alumni, and it's awesome to see where people are going 10 years removed from it.
I know, it really is. It's pretty great to, I think about, who are my closest friends from college, and it really is the people that I shared all these experiences with on rescue. So
And it's crazy we were like manifesting these futures for us, like in the bunk room, in the back room, studying, and we're living it.
I know. And it's really kind of a cool stepping point, like moving forward too, to think about how much more time we have in our careers and how influential we can be on people who come next. So that's something I kind of sneak peek of like what I look forward to in the rest of my career as well. So
Absolutely. I feel like a major portion of rescue was like training others and like building people up who like start off as probies, and then sort of working their way up the chain. How do you feel like that impacted being a resident and doing medical education and now being a fellow and teaching residents? How do you feel like that set you up for where you are now?
yeah. So I think that especially with rescue, you're only as strong as your weakest member, right? So you want your probie or your brand new person to have the knowledge, to have the confidence really to be part of the team and to contribute in an equal way. So I think that really helped me now because I ultimately, even I guess I'll take fellowship, for example. You in ICU fellowship, you're leading the team, and every few weeks, you're changing who your residents are. So they're coming in brand new. Maybe they've never even done a shift in the ICU. It can be really intimidating for them. And you can see that. And I think that the best way to get them kind of on par with everyone else is to just bring them in and let them know, like, you don't feel bad about asking questions. I am here for anything you need, and let me kind of show you the ropes. And it really brings me a lot of joy and really like job satisfaction, I think, to see someone that I'm working with go from the beginning to even the end of 4 weeks and just how much they grow.
Hmm.
And it's so, there's lots of pieces of job satisfaction. And even as I'm like looking for where I'm going next, I'm thinking, do I really not want that as part of my job? Like if I go into private practice, et cetera. But
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, it's awesome. I've seen some wonderful residents come through in this past year too, and just I'm really proud of them. Um, and yeah, I think it's a great extra piece of anesthesia and ICU to have that team mentality.
That's so cool to hear. That's like literally making me excited about my fellowship next year. I
You
love it.
should be. It's going to be
I love
awesome.
it. Yeah. How was residency for you? So you decided to stay at UVM after graduating medical school.
Yeah.
How was it for you?
I loved my residency program. I mean, when we were trying to figure out, so my husband, who I met in medical school, was a year ahead of me, and then stayed back, as you know, to be able to couples match with me. So when we were trying to find a program for us to match to, we adored University of Vermont as medical students, but the program director at the time said, you would do yourself a disservice by not going and seeing what else is out there.
Hmm.
So, we did that, and in the end, we realized that UVM was just like the perfect place for us. So we stayed, and I could not be happier with my decision, really, because for me, it was the right place to be. I had family nearby, so I had a lot of support, but more so, I felt like the program was super supportive, super small. I mean, literally,
Hmm.
there are more people in the residency program in 1 year here at Hopkins than there are in like the whole university program. So I'm like,
Yeah.
how is that possible?
Yeah.
But I think with that small, very, very close-knit department, like they got to know you so well. And so
Hmm.
I felt like my ability to learn and really grow was really wonderful there, since people knew what your strengths were. And also we didn't have fellows. So here I am as a fellow, and it kind of makes me feel bad sometimes. I'm like, ooh, am I like taking too much of this case? Like, let me not tell you what to do, because I remember what it was like to not have fellows, and it was
Right.
quite awesome, honestly. So
Right.
I'm really glad with my training, and even coming to Hopkins, I can see I mean I think we're very well trained, just the broad, like our skill set and how much hands-on we had as
Hmm.
residents. So I think it certainly prepared me for my fellowship years.
How did COVID affect your training?
So, for residency, being in Vermont, and you guys probably remember like all the maps, like Vermont was always this
Was
like
the
little,
best state?
yeah, I was like, hello, we're aerosols up here. Um,
Yeah.
so I have to say it really it didn't affect us the same way that it affected some people. And I have a really good friend who was in New York City, and I couldn't believe the things that he was telling me during that first wave of COVID. And it was heartbreaking because here's someone who's going through a similar experience of residency, and boom, like all of a sudden that just completely diverged. So we really didn't have to I don't think I took care of a COVID positive patient all of residency. They really protected us, but we really just didn't have any
Hmm.
problems. So
Hmm.
it was interesting because actually then in fellowship last year was the first time I really took care of a sick COVID ICU patient, and it was really, I mean, for lack of better words, it was horrible. The disease, and I I could see how people really struggled through it beforehand, and now I was in the midst of it. We actually had in the month of January last year, we had a whole month where the surgical ICU was converted to a COVID ICU,
Hmm.
and that was really, really hard. I guess it's something I knew was always a possibility going into ICU. But I guess I didn't really understand how difficult it could be until I lived it.
Hmm.
And I I hope we don't have to go through that again, but I know that's part of the job, and it might be something that we face in the future again.
Right.
It can be really challenging. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
One thing that really sticks out to me from that period in regards to you and your life, you don't post very often on social media, but I
Mhm.
remember distinctly you posting on Instagram, you getting the first vaccine. And I feel like that was also your pregnancy announcement at the same
Yeah.
time. Uh, what was that like being pregnant during a pandemic and also being like one of the first thousands of people who got the vaccine?
Yeah, you're right. I don't really post too much. I'm more of the like chronic, I flip through and like see what everyone else is doing, and I'm like, oh, I can't post. I'm like too busy. Um, so it was almost um kind of like a silver lining of COVID in a way, because I don't often just like put my life out there and like, I mean, kind of keep a lot of those things to myself. And it was almost nice to sort of enjoy that moment of my life, like, and only tell the people that I really wanted to. Um, so it was kind of precious almost to like have that to myself in a world that everyone knows everything about you, right?
Right.
Um, but then when it got to that point, prior to really knowing if the vaccine was safe or not for pregnant women, it was a tough decision, but ultimately I felt like I trusted science, and I trust the hard work that went into that vaccine, and really just like our medical training and knowledge to say, there are risks to everything that we do in medicine, but at this point, do the risks outweigh the benefits? And I think kind of thinking back to what my friend in New York had gone through, and if I could stop, and not even for myself necessarily, because yeah, maybe um maybe I'm not someone who's so high risk, all of that, but to have the ability to potentially stop the spread to someone that I'm taking care of, that's
Hmm.
really what got to me. And I felt proud of being able to do that, and to, you know, kind of just be someone who could emphasize that the science behind it, even though it's a slightly, unknown at the time, to kind of stand up and say, this can be safe. This
Hmm.
I want to be a support for someone who may be having a hard time making that decision. It's interesting because, I got a lot of people being like, "Oh my God, you're pregnant! Congrats!" And I was like, "Okay, that's not really the point of the post."
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
But really, there were a handful of people that reached out to me and said, like, "Thank you so much, because I'm having a really hard time deciding what I should do because I'm pregnant, or I want to be pregnant." And to be able to not necessarily say, "Well, you should get the vaccine," but be a source of just like support for someone else who's having a hard time making that decision. I
Hmm.
think that's really why I posted it.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, I think my son's okay. He's kind of a wild child, but he's pretty healthy, and I think he turned out okay from the vaccine.
How old is Cam now?
Gosh, he's gonna be 2 on
Wow.
New Year's Day, so
Wow.
we're getting very close. He's talking a lot, and the other day, I don't know what I did, but he just says things, and I'm like, "How do you know this? Like, how?"
Uh-huh.
And he looks, and he goes, "You're funny, Mama." I was like,
Oh my
"What?"
God, that's so amazing.
It's so cute.
That's
So
adorable.
I know, but I mean, life has certainly changed with him, and just kind of,
Oh, I
I think,
bet.
trajectory of life and whatnot. But
Yeah, I'm sure your priorities change, your perception of time changes,
for sure,
the
for
way you
sure.
spend your free time, obviously.
Yeah, what free time? No.
Yeah, exactly. Different
Yeah,
definition.
I know, exactly. Back when I thought I didn't have any time, and now I'm like, oh yeah, now I know what it means to not have time.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, I was going to ask if people came to you after that and sort of asked you for advice, but it sounds like people were. Before you did it, were you going like reaching out to people for advice, or were there certain resources you were looking towards?
so I did, I mean, I talked to my OBGYN about it, who was really supportive and ultimately kind of, I think what I really appreciated was looking at medicine this just the way we do, right? Risks and benefits. And like
Right,
you are in a high risk field, Danie. So
right.
yes, like the risk for you could be much higher than, someone who in this pandemic isn't really faced with any of those concerns. So I thought it was a really good conversation. I did, I reached out to my mom, of course, too. She's a
Mm-hmm.
nurse, but
Mm-hmm.
and my husband too. And I think, we really thought long and hard about things, but ultimately, um, yeah, I did reach out to other people and actually multiple people in different specialties. And even, oh, right, there was a infectious disease fellow too. I was like, hey, help me out here. And I think all of that information was good. There were some people who were like, I really don't know, but here's what I do know. And so just having people to help me make the best informed decision was really important. And yeah.
Awesome. Yeah,
Mhm.
going back to your previous point of like EMS people and anesthesiologists, they don't speak up often, but when
Mhm.
they do speak up, people will usually listen. And that's
Yeah.
exactly how I felt when you made that post. I was like, Danny doesn't like post much at all, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna read every single word she's writing right now because
Oh.
I know it's important.
Yeah, yeah. I look back at that post sometimes too, and it does make me very proud to pick and choose. And I think even as you'll find out, and you probably have found out already too, in like an ICU capacity, um, especially in a open unit where you're working with different teams
Hmm.
and you're more of a consultant. You may want to do something a different way, but really pick and choose like what's most important.
Hmm.
And those are the things that you stake and say, hey, no, actually, this I think is what we need to do. Because if you
Hmm.
do that to everything, like not everyone's always going to listen. So
Right, right. And
yeah,
we know what types of people or people like that out there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. This is an intermission. You're about halfway through the episode. Now would be a good time to take a break, put the podcast down, and come back to it at a later time. If you're really into the episode and you want to keep pushing forward, then just push ahead 15 seconds and keep on going. If you do take a break, you're going to want to be sure to come back because most of the guests seem to save their best for last, and you're not going to want to miss what's coming up next.
Yeah.
What's it like having two anesthesiologists in the household?
Um, you know, I would love to have someone just like plant a camera in our house and like tell me what they really think. Because I swear, like sometimes you're like, okay, we need to stop talking about work. We just need to stop.
That's what I was
Because
going to ask. So you talk a lot about work?
and yes, and it's like not intentional sometimes. Like we have to be more intentional about like, okay, you have 5 minutes to tell me how your day was at work, and then I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Uh-huh.
Like
Uh-huh.
you're cut off.
Yeah.
Because it can get really just into the weeds of this and that and this. But it also is just so wonderful. But I mean, granted, I don't know what the opposite would be like,
Sure.
but it is really, really nice to be able to come home and say, oh my gosh, this happened. And for my husband Ben to understand where I'm coming from.
Right.
Um, I think it's been I don't know that I could have done it a different way. So having that support, he is like the most supportive person in my life, and just having that mutual understanding of things. But it's been interesting actually going through fellowship, and now he's working as an attending, just as a generalist, and seeing kind of how we were same medical school class, same residency class, and all of a sudden, boom, like things diverged. Just to see where things really have kind of gone our separate ways in terms of our careers. But it's really great, and I think there's certainly challenges with it too. He has his call schedule, I have mine, and so trying to like work around that, especially with Cam and everything, that can be really challenging. And
Hmm.
so I think we've actually found that to be more difficult and when we're looking for jobs and stuff, and finding, again, talking about support, finding people who are in that similar situation, because a lot of folks that we talk to, maybe their significant other doesn't work quite as much as one of us does, and so it's hard to
Mhm.
sort of see what a potential job would be without someone who's like living that too with both
Right.
people in the household. So yeah, it certainly has its challenges, but I do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's cool to speak the same lingo and
Hmm.
like be able to kind of like what you said, get into the weeds of things. But sometimes it's just nice to just talk through
Yeah,
scenarios or like troubleshoot.
yeah, definitely. I mean, there's certainly those times too where he'll be like, "So this happened at work," and I'm like, "Huh?" And he's like, "You wouldn't have done that, would you?" And I'm like, "No, no, like I'm not saying I would."
Of course, there's that.
Yep. So
Maybe put a bigger IV in next time, buddy.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Oh, so you didn't get that central line. Okay.
Okay, I see.
Yep.
So what kind of practice has Ben working? Does he work for Hopkins as well?
Yeah, so he works at their like cross campus location called Bayview.
Okay.
So it's, I guess I would say it's a little more of like private practice type feel, or smaller center. Um, but he's doing, general cases ranging ortho, vascular, all the above, trauma, burn. They actually, the burn center in the state of Maryland is over there. So
Mm-hmm.
um he really loves the people he works with. He gets a lot of satisfaction out of taking care of the patient population, and honestly, like there's some really sick people that they take care of. So I got to work over there a bit last year, just
Cool.
like moonlighting, and
Yeah.
it was a good place to work. So
Nice. And how did
yeah.
you get convinced into doing a 2-year fellowship?
2 years. Um, well,
Sucker.
so yeah, right. I think I kind of convinced myself that it was the right decision. And the Danie of, gosh, maybe 4 years ago totally had the right idea and was like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, you know,
What
the
was the
Danie,
Danny of 4 years ago
oh,
thinking?
I mean, she was like, I'm working at a big academic medical center. Like, I'm going to be the best of the best to do this, this,
Of
this. Like, I got
course, that's the Danny I.
right. Yeah.
That's who I know.
Yeah. And then life changes and your priorities change. And
You
I'm
have a
like,
baby.
yes, yes. And you grow and you in many ways. After this past year, transitioning into my second year, I was like, what am I doing? Like some people barely go for 1 year, like two. Um, but to be honest, how to answer your actual question, how did I rope into that, right?
Yeah.
Um, it it really came down to the fact that I knew I wanted to do intensive care, and that's like why I went into anesthesia. Um, and the kinds of patients that I enjoyed the most were the cardiac ICU patients, because they scared me the most. I think, you have someone who's septic and okay, you give them fluid. Oh, I gave them a little too much, it can diurese it, but like you give someone with heart failure a little too much, it can be really really not as easy to reverse.
Mhm.
Um, so they're scary to me, and I wanted that knowledge, and I wanted to be able to take the best care possible of ICU patients in the cardiac ICU, and I do not regret it at all because I stepped into the cardiac ICU a few weeks ago after having some months under my belt in cardiac anesthesia, and man, did I felt so much better just having a different understanding, and constantly putting people on bypass, like, oh, cannulating for ECMO, and now going and taking care of them. I'm like, oh, I understand why they did this, and it just sort of solidified for me, again, the reason why I chose to do both was to take the best care possible of the patients in the ICU, and I think it's going to give me that skill set. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. It's so
yeah.
crazy. Like it really resonated with me when you said I'm still understanding the why, because
Mhm.
like you think you have everything figured out, and there's still like so much more to learn.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like just like a constant. I mean, we know going into this that it's just going to be a constant forever learning.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely went through the same decision process. I was thinking like a 2-year fellowship and then eventually settled on just ICU.
Yeah.
But there were also people telling me you're a fool for not just going into the market right now
Right.
because the market's incredible.
Mhm.
But the more I've sat with this and the more I've had to explain my rationale, I feel like job satisfaction is just something you can't put a price value to. And
Mhm.
like you got to chase what you've always wanted to do.
That's true. And and I think what I'll say to you too, and kind of say it out loud to myself, is that it's interesting because right now it scares me a little bit as I've looked at jobs to be like, oh my goodness, I had this track and this idea of who I was going to be and what I wanted,
Hmm.
and the possibility that 5 years from now that could be different than what I'm sitting here thinking now. Um, there's part of me that's like, well, what am I just wasting my time? Like, what if I choose in 5 years to not do cardiac anesthesia, or if I don't want to do ICU anymore? Did I waste time? And I keep reminding myself that like none of this is a waste. It's only going to help me be better in, the general OR in whatever facet, and to be able to be again a resource for other people. But as you are about to step into critical care, I think I will just echo and let you know that it's okay if, even after you're done your fellowship, what you decide of what you want for your life and your career is different than what you think right now. Like that's totally okay. And that's part of life, is things evolve and change, and what's right for you right now might not be what's right for you a year, 5, 10 years from now. So
Absolutely. That's really sound advice.
mhm.
It's so hard to predict where your future is going to go, but you
Right.
might as well set yourself up to, be able to take on any opportunity that you want to do in the future.
Exactly, exactly. And I think having that versatility and ability to, offer something a little bit different than someone who maybe does go straight out of residency into the job market, I think you'll always have that extra skill set and that extra just knowledge and confidence of your own abilities. So
Hmm. What year have you liked better, your
yeah,
cardiac or your ICU year?
it's tough. They're very different. I'll be honest, like transitioning into cardiac year was pretty challenging. In ways I didn't expect. I think the
You did that your second year, correct? You did
yeah.
ICU and then cardiac.
So I think that the ICU year is a lot of go, go, go. Like you see a lot that think about, I'm sure for you guys probably do like a month of ICU at a time, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
in
yeah.
residency, just like most of us. Uh, and next year you'll see to do 9, 10 plus months in a whole year is just it's physically, it's mentally exhausting, but it's wonderful at the same time. And I think I was just like go, 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 go. And then when the transition happened, it was like I hit a wall. And everything, all the stuff you saw, the trauma, everything, just almost like came down on me at once. And I was like, what is happening? Need a break.
What
And
month was that for you?
that was this August. And for the first time in my entire career, I almost felt like a, truly burned out almost. And it scared me to think like, wow, this I didn't feel like myself. And in that, when I went to work in the cardiac hours, this is new, and I'm like, I should be here, I should be present and like excited. I was doing the best I could to almost just be like, okay, like let me get through today, and then I just need to like get home and like decompress.
Hmm.
But I have an absolutely phenomenal program director. And I remember we were in the OR one day and I was like, okay, so this is the case we're doing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I just need to talk to you about something, and just like kind of unloaded. And to have, again, I feel like this keeps this theme of support, support, support. Like have someone who gets it and who did both ICU and cardiac, but more so just like understanding where you're coming from, of like how draining that year can be on you.
Hmm.
Um, and recognizing like whatever you need, like I'm here for you and you will get through it, but it's okay. And this happens to the best of us.
Hmm.
Um, so plus I was like taking my oral boards in the same month. There's just a lot of stress going on.
That's hard.
Yeah. Either way, I feel like I'm on the other side of that right now, and I'm super psyched and happy to be in cardiac. It's just a different workflow.
Mm-hmm.
But as you mentioned earlier, now I'm in the cardiac ICU right now and loving life. So it's a great mix, and I I think it makes me happy to think about how the potential of, okay, my actual career will be like ICU, and then that maybe that's a week, and then I go back to the OR and I get to do that, and I think that's what I like the most, is just mixing it up a bit.
Right.
So it's been good and tiring all at the same time. I actually think I'm in the hospital more this year than I was in ICU, which is like so weird to think about, but
Uh-huh.
yeah.
You're still smiling though.
Yeah, I mean, here I am doing what I really do want to do, and I do think that I'm making a difference in people's lives, hopefully. And yeah, it's good. It's really
That's
good.
awesome. I'm really proud of you because I mean it makes a ton of sense for you to be doing the combined fellowship. Like I was not surprised at all when I knew that you were doing it. It's just very, very fitting for you and who you are deep down.
Yeah, thanks. No, I definitely I struggled with the decision initially, like, do I do both? Do I not? And I like you saying, I don't regret it at all. Yeah.
Awesome. So you alluded to it earlier, but you said you sort of shifted the way you're thinking about where your career is going, and you're probably getting ready to look at jobs now. So what kind of jobs are you looking at?
So I have completed my job interviews as of last week. Yeah. And
How many places did you interview at?
4.
Okay.
So, you know, kind of as I said earlier, I had this vision in my head a few years ago that it was going to be like big old academic medical center, doing all that stuff. And really it's, you know, what you know. Um, and so I think the thing that was really coolest was looking at jobs. I literally went on to Gasworks and I was like, critical care. Okay, what can I find? And so it sort of just led me like here and there and all over the place. And I talked to a lot of different people and groups and just reached out to get more information. And I think the most interesting thing was how vastly different every job was. And
Huh.
you'll see this too, especially with ICU.
Huh.
Um, and I just wasn't really prepared for that because
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm like, oh, ICU is ICU and anesthesia is anesthesia. And so things are very different, and not just the difference between academic and private, but between private practices, even academic practices. Like, just your job description is going to be different. So with that being said, ended up applying and interviewing to 2 academic and 2 private, I guess I would say. But
Uh-huh.
in the mix of that, like academic, one is a private group that's at an academic medical center.
Okay.
So kind of almost the best of both worlds, in my
Yeah.
opinion, in some
Yeah.
ways. So as we're kind of rounding out the process and actually deciding, kind of between 2 places right now that do look very different in
Hmm.
some ways. And I think the biggest thing right now is deciding, are we going to be in a location that's right next to family, like 20 minutes away, or are we
Hmm.
going to be in a place that maybe the job is more like in alignment with what I want, but in a place that family's not close by. So that's really our struggle right now.
Hmm.
I wish I could tell you I've signed and then I would tell you exactly where I'm going. But
It's
what
all
I
good. It sounds like you're so close though, which is the
so
exciting
close,
part.
so close. I'll be on the eastern side of the US.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Um, Without naming names, obviously, but like what was different about the jobs? Like hours, your split between the ORs and ICU, like your responsibilities. Like, can you go into specifics a little bit about like big things that you noticed about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it came down to the ICU work. And going into it, and at every place I would say, like, the ICU is going to define my job. And it's true, because
Hmm.
what you may see is places that have very well established anesthesia intensivists in a group running an ICU
Mm-hmm.
or mixed group, but it's not a new concept
Mm-hmm.
versus some of these places, more so private places that until 2-3 years ago never even knew that anesthesiologists could be critical care doctors.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference between kind of the how old the group is, more or less, like how long anesthesiologists have been practicing as ICU doctors, I think has made a difference in these places. And the not only the types of ICU that you're going to work in, so is it going to be surgical critical care, is it going to be mixed like med surg, or is it just strictly cardiac
Mm-hmm.
ICU? Some of the jobs I've looked at, and actually the ones I'm looking at more closely, actually would plant me in the cardiac surgery ICU, and also the like equivalent of the, I don't know if where you guys at Brown call it like the CCU, like the cardiac critical unit or whatever it is,
Right.
more like the medical, the pre-surgical side.
Right.
So that's a little different, but whether you are on 24/7 for a week and maybe getting called in at night versus some places that you're on for a week, but it's only days and then there's someone else covering at night.
Mm-hmm.
So some places you work for a week and then you get the next week off completely as an intensivist. Some places you work for the week and you don't even get Monday off and you're back in the
Mm-hmm.
OR. So kind of figuring out like what is important for your lifestyle. I think that sort of helped me to weed out what jobs may be best for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think ultimately it's my job that's going to put the most strain on our family structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I'm interested to see in the future kind of what you find as what job you take and what's out there, a year from now. So
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. We'll talk off camera sometime.
yeah, I'm sure we will.
Yeah. I mean, you're super lucky that Ben is obviously really supportive, and you have that flexibility to kind of go wherever, and you know
Yeah.
that he's going to be able to get a job wherever you go.
Yeah, it's been definitely met with even like residency where people are like, how, it's gotta be hard. There's two of you applying. And it's like actually people are like really intrigued by this like dual anesthesiologist,
Yeah.
a 2-for-1. And especially now they're like, oh, we're gonna pull one. Oh, we get another one. Because a lot of places are as you mentioned,
Desperate.
the job market's great because
Yeah.
short staffing like everywhere. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's cool, but I do think that after these last 2 years in Baltimore, Ben, if he had to choose where I went to fellowship, don't think it would have been here. It's just it's different than what we're used to.
Totally. Totally.
So I think now it's time for me to compromise, and although
Mm-hmm.
there's one of these jobs that might be better for me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with going with the one that ultimately might be a little bit better for him too.
Totally get it.
Yeah.
And your description of private / academic, so that implies that there's residents there.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
Which one job doesn't have residents, one does. And
Mm-hmm.
more so this week, I'm thinking a little more of how I don't know if I'm ready to step away from teaching. And that really does satisfy a certain part of my life and career that I don't think I would get otherwise.
Yeah. I totally feel that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So the last question I'm going to leave you with is, what has been one of your most proudest moments of your career so far?
Oh boy. Oh man, put me on the spot. Um,
Just a moment to brag about yourself.
oh, you know, I I could go with there are some patients that their families have impacted me and really changed how I view things in life. There's a handful of those stories, but I'm gonna go with one that actually happened yesterday. And I was in the ICU, and there is a resident who is also on the ICU rotation, and the attending was like, "Oh, you're on this rotation," and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've been here for 2 weeks and stuff," and she's like, "Oh, were you rounding?" Because the attending had just changed. Like, were you rounding with this team? And she's like, well, sort of, like I've been kind of following any patient that's interesting, but actually I'm just following Danie now. And she's like, what? She's like, well, no, but Danie's like a really great teacher. So, when you find a fellow or an attending that's good, like you just kind of latch onto them and just want to stay with them. And I really, maybe that's cheesy, whatever, like, but to me that means so much. And that the fact that like what I'm doing day to day, am I saving lives? Am I making a difference in that? Sure. But like the fact that without even really trying, just offering what I can, even though my knowledge may not be as great as, someone who's been doing this for so long, but I didn't even realize that I had made someone feel like that comfortable and excited to be working with me. It really holds like a special place in and makes me proud of like the person I've developed into, and hoping that wherever I go next, that's like a continued sense and a continued thing that I can provide and be of value to someone else. So I know my mentors have been extremely invaluable, and I'm still very close to a lot of them from even back in med school. And so I just hope that as I go on in my career that I can emulate that and be that for someone else. So yeah, that's probably where I'll leave that piece.
I love it. That's such a great way to end it, because you've been an incredible role model for me for over a decade now. And you motivate me to be the best me I can possibly be and push the bar and go above and beyond. So kudos to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Keep being you.
Yeah, no, I'm very satisfied being here, and I appreciate you having me on your podcast. It really does mean a lot, and I'm super excited again to see, 5 years from now where we are and all the things that we can share.
Definitely. All right, Danie, hopefully I'll see you in person sometime and meet Cam.
Yeah, I know, you have to.
We will. We'll make it happen.
All right, sounds good.
All right, bye, Danie.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Behind the Drapes. If you like what you hear, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you can get all the new episodes of the show as they drop right to your homepage. If you really, really liked what you hear, be sure to rate and review so that other people can find the show easily, and also tell a friend so they could check it out too. Special thanks to all the guests who come on the show and help make my job a lot easier, and hopefully make an entertaining time for you guys to listen to. We'll see you next time.